Hey up everybody, welcome back to the I'll Do Cycling YouTube channel where today we're going to be taking a look at all of my results from the Velogames 2022 season. And I think that it's only fair that you guys, considering that I give you advice on who to pick for your teams, that you see how my results have been this year so that you can see that I'm not just, making stuff up as I go along. So let's start off with Paris-Nice. This was the first kind of stage race that counted because of course we didn't have the Tour Down Under this year. We will do next year though. And arguably Paris-Nice was my worst stage race of them all, really. Of course, I did have Wout Art, but I think like 95% of people did, so that's not really something too different. And other than that, it was a little bit disappointing in terms of I thought that Adam Yates would do a bit better in GC and Jorgensen as well. We did have Cockard who did okay in a couple of sprints, but we also, we lacked Colbrelli and Maida. I think they left pretty soon on. Perhaps the whole of the Bahrain team was out, I can't really remember. But Paris-Nice wasn't particularly great because we didn't have any of like Roglic in there or Simon Yates or whatever, so that wasn't a particularly good one. But at the same time, we did have a Tirreno Adriatico running, which was a better performance from me. I think it was a bit easier to pick a team because you just pick Pogacar and Vingegaard, and then you fill out the rest with just some very misc riders. I think we did alright because, Pogacar, Vingegaard, we also had Coin there who did really well in a couple of sprints, but other than that, it was quite disappointing. The 6 point riders of like Gernelek, Benjamin Thomas, and Affini didn't really do too much. I also thought that Christoph and Viviani would do better in the sprints. I should have picked Bauhaus instead and stuck to my thinking. But we finished like 400 out of 3,500, so that's not too bad in all honesty. And we're definitely like warming up to probably one of my better performances of the year, which is the Volta Catalunya. So this was such a good one for me because we finished 220th, so that's like top 10%. I think that's a pretty good gauge where if you're doing quite well. We had Higuita in here, of course he won. He was only 10 points. Quintana. We also had some good sprinters in Groves and Bauhaus, a couple of stage wins there. And Johannesson was a really good 6 pointer as well. Valverde and Woods arguably bringing the team down, considering that they were quite expensive as well. Valverde was 18, Woods was 14, so if we didn't have those guys in there, we would have done even better. Probably should have gone with like an Almeida or something there because he finished really high up in GC2. And then we went into the Itzulia Basque Country where I think we did well again. Of course, we didn't have the winner. We didn't have Danny Martinez. We didn't have Jonas Aguirre. Roglic, Vingegaard, Rodriguez, we got a stage win there. Evenepoel. Arguably what I should have done, I'm not really sure why I didn't do this. Instead of Roglic and say Cepeda, I could have gone with Martinez and Bilbao. I'm not really sure why I didn't do that. That's definitely a bit of oversight on me, and that I was so determined to get Roglic in. So definitely something to take into next year is to really consider whether the most expensive rider is always worth it. But I think that was a pretty good performance. I was 650th, so okay, but definitely room for improvement. Romandy, I think we had a couple of stage wins here. We had Vlasov who won 140th overall, so again pretty good. Dennis as well did a fantastic ride in Romandy. Hayter got a stage win. O'Connor was up there in GC. Bevan got a stage win. Hermans was competing in sprints. Plapp kind of did a GC job. 180 points is pretty good. And it was just Cataneo and Cavagna who really let me down. For some reason I picked Cavagna even though Ayuso was also 10 points. So I'm not really sure why I did that. Considering that Cavagna was just only there for a TT. I think that this year I was just very apprehensive of putting Ayuso on despite his insane talent. I think that I'll definitely need to trust Ayuso a bit more in the future. And then moving on to the first Grand Tour of the year, we had the Giro d'Italia. For some reason I got to the end of this and I was a little bit disappointed, but upon reflection I did really well. 300th in the world out of 18,000. It's probably one of my best Grand Tour performances ever, to be honest. Stage Race Championship, we moved up to 26. We had Carapaz, of course, he lost, but we had some really good 8-point riders like Mollema, Kemner, Girmay and Rensman who all did exceptionally well. Bini, of course, he left because of the cork to his eye, so I would have got more points there. Van der Poel was fantastic. Almeida left as well in like the last few stages because of COVID. So overall, it was a really solid team, and the only real disappointments were like Skelmos Jensen and Attila Valter. I should have really gone with somebody like Simone Consoni and Edward Turns for the sprints instead. I'd definitely need to reconsider some of the 6-point riders who I go with in the future, because they definitely make the differences when you get towards the top end of the leaderboards. In the Dauphiné, again, top 200 in the world out of like 5,000 people, so that's pretty good. We went with a Jumbo-Visma trio, and that paid off massively, and they were really the carriers of the team alongside Even Hayter. The other 5 riders weren't particularly great. I went with some kind of second-tier sprinters in Louvel, Stuyven and Mazzato. They didn't really work. Dunbar didn't work as a GC option. Lawrence Huys did good in Norway, so as a 4-point rider, he's not too bad. And I certainly think that this was a strong performance heading into the Tour. We moved up to 19th overall in the world, and we actually moved up a little bit further after the Tour de Suisse, as you'll see here. This was where we hit the highest point of a stage race championship in the year. We peaked at 7th place in the world. We had the likes of Fulsang, Martinez, Clon, Matthews, Evenepoel. Of course, this was the race plagued with COVID, so it was a tricky one to kind of get right. You would have to get quite lucky to do quite well, but I shouldn't have gone with the likes of, say, Turgis. I don't think that was a particularly good call when they also had Sagan. I thought that Maida would do better in Switzerland because he is from Switzerland. So I think it was a solid team on paper, but I just think that the COVID really wiped it out. Of course, Evenepoel also underperformed just a little bit as well. And then moving on to the next one. So this is the big one, the Velogame 2022, basically the Tour de France. And this was pretty good in the sense that I had Vingegaard and Wout van Aert, and I trusted them quite a lot throughout the year to score me points, and we finished 10,000th out of 26,000, so not great, to be honest with you. We dropped to 84th in the Stage Race Championship. I picked Roglic over Pogačar. That was a big mistake. I could have gone with Pogačar, Dylan Teuns and Nielsen Paulus instead. That would have been a lot better. I was also thinking of going with Jorgensen instead of like Verona or Klon. So definitely a couple of mistakes there. Caruso wasn't great. Guerrero crashed, so I don't really blame him too much. I think a lot of people picked him. And I think overall it was a really good team. And definitely, I'll have to consider Pogačar for the Tour next year. But I think it'll be very hard to get him, Vingegaard and Wout van Aert onto the same team next year. Tour of Polonia, the kind of invisible race because it wasn't on like GCM Plus or whatever. I think this one went okay because we did have Hayter who ended up winning. We had Tulla in there. I thought he would do better. And we had some good sprinters in Coy and Ackerman. But Johannesson left very early on. Cavendish and Groves weren't great in the sprints. I thought that Sean Quinn would do better, especially after doing really well in the Dauphiné. Amaral did alright, but I did also think that he would do a bit better. So we finished 1,400th out of 3,000 odd, so still in the top half, but we missed the likes of an Arensman, Sobrero, etc., who did well in GC. So perhaps I should have gone a bit more GC intensive in that approach rather than so sprinter orientated. And then the last one is the Vuelta, which was okay again because I had Evenepoel, I did have Almeida again, Lopez. Yates unfortunately left because of COVID. I think that if it wasn't for that, we would have finished much higher up. We'd still finished inside roughly the top third. Hayter was a little bit disappointing, as was Groves, although Groves did get the stage win. Hannanen, I thought would do well after Tour de l'Ain. Millard wasn't really active. I thought Boitlago would repeat what he did in the Giro. So definitely some weak points in the team, but of course we did have Evenepoel, and that was a trend in this year. I did do better in the sense where I had, Evenepoel for the Vuelta, I had Vingegaard for the Tour, and I had Carapaz for the Giro, so I picked the kind of top guys. But of course there's the guys surrounding them, those other GC riders, where they didn't quite live up to my expectations. Just a quick recap on the Super Classico. I will do a whole separate video on the Super Classico, but I finished 28th in the world in Super Classico. But yeah, I'll do a separate whole video on that. And then also the women's side of things. Again, I will do a whole separate video for the women's racing. But just in short, I finished 5th in the Women's Cycling Championship. In the Classics, I finished 17th, and therefore overall I finished in 7th place. But I did end up winning the inaugural Tour of Scandinavia. But I will cover that in the next video, so be sure to subscribe and come back to watch that video in the next few days. And all that is left to say is keep safe out there, have a Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in the next video. Salut!